You ever notice how after the biggest breakthroughs in life comes a silence that feels less like celebration and more like standing in the middle of an empty field, unsure where to go? Everyone told you awakening would feel like clarity, like purpose igniting your soul. But what if, instead of fire, it left you in a kind of sacred fog, where the drive to chase, achieve, even become, simply vanished? If that feels familiar, this video is for you, because you're not broken. You're not failing. You are standing on the threshold Carl Jung described, not collapse, but chrysalis, a deep psychic recalibration no one ever warned us about. And in part 3 of this journey, we'll reveal something almost no one explains clearly: how motivation transforms after awakening. Not into hustle, but into a whisper so quiet you might miss it if you don't know how to listen. I remember a friend, brilliant, introspective, spiritually awake. After her awakening, she lay in bed for weeks, not depressed, just still. She said, "I thought I'd feel lit up, but I just feel dumb." I didn't judge her. I understood her, because I had been there too. If you've ever felt that way, if you're in that sacred pause right now, drop a quiet "I'm here too" in the comments. And maybe share this with someone whose fire looks like it went out, but who might just be in the middle of becoming. You thought awakening would feel like arriving, didn't you? That once the veil lifted, everything would suddenly make sense. That purpose would blaze in your chest. That your real life would finally begin. But instead, it felt like the floor gave out. What used to light you up now feels hollow. The drive that once pulled you out of bed gone. The goals you chased for years now look like distant shadows. And worst of all, there's a strange stillness that no one ever warned you about. This isn't the burnout of overwork. It's deeper, it's sacred, but terrifying. It's the moment after the mask falls and before a new face forms. At first, this stillness feels like a relief, like finally stepping out of a burning building and into clean air. But then, the silence grows. You stop striving. You stop proving, not out of despair, but a kind of sacred exhaustion. People around you start asking, "What's wrong?" But you can't explain it, because nothing happened, and yet everything changed. This is the paradox of awakening. You were told you'd feel lit up, but instead you feel extinguished. Carl Jung saw this phase clearly. He called it the terrain between ego death and the emergence of the self, a liminal space, a holy fog, where the noise fades, but the new voice hasn't yet spoken. You are not regressing. You are not broken. You are simply standing in the silence after the storm. The ego, the one that chased, achieved, impressed, has been burned away, and for a moment, there's nothing replacing it. And here's the part no one tells you. This pause isn't failure. It's formation. The caterpillar doesn't grow wings in motion. It dissolves in stillness, a complete undoing, a messy, unstructured, terrifying goo phase. And that's where you are. Not crawling, not flying, just becoming. This stillness you feel, it's not apathy, it's alchemy. And if you can breathe through it, if you can resist the urge to rush or retreat, you will discover something miraculous. Stillness is not the end of your story. It is the space between who you were and who your soul is preparing you to be. If this feels familiar, if you've been drifting through this quiet in-between, drop a "still becoming" in the comments. Your voice belongs here. Your silence means something. Before the silence, there was striving. And maybe you were good at it, really good. You had goals. You had checklists. You knew what to chase, even if it never quite filled you. But it gave you direction, momentum, a sense of identity. You were the achiever, the helper, the strong one. You wore the mask well. So well, in fact, that even you forgot it was a mask. Then came the awakening, the moment the curtain dropped. And suddenly, you saw it all. The illusion of performance, the emptiness behind the applause, the exhaustion behind the image. You stopped chasing not because you gave up, but because you saw through. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "The persona is a system of behavior imposed by society." It's not who you are. It's who you learn to be to survive, to belong, to succeed. But once the persona cracks, so does the fuel that powered it. That's why your old motivation vanished. It wasn't yours. It belonged to the mask. And here's the painful truth, that loss is necessary. Because real drive, soul-led drive, can't emerge until the false one burns out. Think of it like this. If your motivation was a flame, it used to burn with gasoline quick, hot, attention-seeking. Now it's gone dark. And you're standing in the ash, wondering why the fire died. But maybe it didn't die. Maybe it's just waiting for a new source of fuel, a quieter one, a deeper one that doesn't roar, but hums. Most people never get here. They feel the silence and panic. So they chase noise again. They return to performance, mistaking it for purpose. But you stayed. And that means something's shifting. You're not being lazy. You're being emptied. So you can be filled with something more real. Something that doesn't need applause to feel alive. Something that doesn't come from fear but from alignment. So if your to-do list no longer moves you, if your 5-year plan suddenly feels irrelevant, know this. You're not failing. You're outgrowing your old fuel. Take a breath. The drive will return, but it won't look like it used to. It won't push. It will pull, and that's how you'll know it's real. If this part resonated, drop a comment. I've outgrown my old fuel. You wake up and nothing calls you. No urge to create. No pull to achieve. No fire in the belly. Just quiet. And it scares you, because everything you once depended on, drive, goals, clarity, is gone, replaced by a thick, echoing stillness. You ask yourself, am I depressed? But deep down, you know this isn't the same. You're not hopeless. You're not numb. You're just in between. This is the void. And Carl Jung called it something ancient, negredo, the blackening phase of alchemy. A sacred dissolution where the old self dies, but the new one hasn't taken form. It's not dysfunction. It's transformation. Think of a caterpillar. Before it becomes a butterfly, it turns to goo. Literally, it dissolves into formlessness inside the chrysalis. Not asleep. Not active. Just undone. That's you right now. And just like the caterpillar, your transformation isn't visible on the outside. So to others, you might look lazy, lost, unmotivated. But inside, something is stirring. Modern life has no patience for this phase. It glamorizes breakthroughs, but not the breakdowns that precede them. It rushes you to get back on track. But how can you return to a track that no longer exists? This is where the real courage begins, not in climbing, but in standing still. Not in answers, but in unlearning. Not in knowing who you are, but in daring to not know. Here's the miracle of the void. It's not empty. It's formative. It is the womb of your next self. And if you can stay here, if you can resist labeling it as apathy or failure, you will find that what's growing inside you is not urgency, but authenticity. Not speed, but depth. You are not disintegrating. You are disidentifying from every false layer that can't come with you into what's next. That silence is not your soul giving up. It's your ego letting go. And when the ego lets go, something truer gets to breathe. If this part touched something deep in you, comment below. Stillness is sacred. At first, you think the worst part of the void is the silence. But then, the shadows arrive. Grief you'd buried. Anger you never allowed. Regrets you kept hidden under productivity. Now, with no distractions left, they rise. And it's disorienting because you expected awakening to bring peace, not a storm of old pain. But this, too, is part of the process. Carl Jung called it shadow work. Not because you're broken, but because you're whole. And wholeness means meeting the parts you once left behind. In the stillness, the unconscious speaks. It whispers through your restlessness, through your sudden tears, through memories you can't explain revisiting. You start to see it, the moments when you abandoned yourself to fit in, the times you silenced your truth to be loved, the deep ache of not being seen, even by yourself. And here is the sacred irony. It is the very absence of doing that creates the space for this healing to begin. When you stop striving, you stop hiding. And when you stop hiding, you start feeling. This isn't dysfunction. This is integration. The pain isn't returning to punish you. It's re-emerging to be released. You're not regressing. You're remembering. This is the real awakening, not floating above life, but descending into it. Not bypassing your darkness, but bringing light into it. And yes, it hurts. Because to meet your shadows, you must also meet the part of you that was never held. The child that was told to be quiet, to be good, to be strong. But when you hold that part now, something shifts. The shadows stop screaming. They start guiding. They become messengers, not to destroy you, but to bring you home. So if you're feeling lost, heavy, raw, you're not going backward. You're going inward. And inside you lives everything you've been searching for. If you're facing your shadows in this season, drop a comment. I'm not hiding anymore. You've been taught that movement means progress. That if you're not building, hustling, achieving, you're falling behind. So when everything in you slows down, your first instinct is fear. You look around and see others speeding past, launching, growing, glowing, and you feel stuck, like life is happening without you. But what if this pause isn't a detour, but a destination? Stillness is not the opposite of progress. It is the womb where new direction is conceived. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that when the ego collapses, the psyche doesn't shut down, it rewires. You're not stalling. You're being rewritten. Think of it like a GPS losing signal. The old coordinates no longer apply. The path it used to follow has disappeared. And instead of rushing to recalculate, the system waits. It doesn't move, not because it's broken, but because it refuses to lead you somewhere false. That's you now. The drive to hustle has gone silent. Not because you've lost your way, but because the road you used to walk was never truly yours. And in that pause, the soul begins to write a new map. But it writes in silence. It sketches in symbols. It speaks in whispers that only reveal themselves when you stop shouting your plans into the void. This is why stillness is sacred. It is not a break in your story. It is the chapter where your true narrative begins. Let go of the pressure to be seen moving. Let go of the shame for not producing. What you're creating now is invisible but essential. You're crafting alignment. You're rebuilding from essence, not ego. And when you do move again, it won't be out of fear of falling behind, but from a quiet, confident knowing that the direction is real. If this gave you permission to pause, comment. I trust the stillness. It doesn't come back the way you expect. Motivation, I mean. You wait for the spark, the rush, the familiar adrenaline of needing to prove something, but it doesn't arrive. Instead, what returns is different. Softer, slower, quieter. Not a roar, but a whisper. This is soul-led motivation. And it doesn't move through urgency. It doesn't scream. It doesn't panic. It hums. It speaks in sensations, not schedules. It pulls, not pushes. And it never demands you betray yourself to feel worthy. At first, this kind of motivation can feel ... confusing. You question if it's real, because we've been conditioned to believe motivation should be loud, relentless, measurable. But the soul doesn't operate on performance. It doesn't care about likes, timelines, or milestones. It cares about truth. And the truth is, you don't need to be on fire to be in alignment. Sometimes alignment looks like resting, saying no, changing your mind, following the smallest thread of curiosity instead of forcing a 5-year plan. That's the shift. You no longer move because you have to. You move because something inside you wants to breathe. Carl Jung called this individuation, not just becoming yourself, but becoming who you truly are, beneath all the shoulds, masks, and expectations. And when that begins, you might find yourself creating, showing up, even leading not because it's expected, but because it feels like a betrayal not to. This isn't the motivation of the ego. This is the calling of the self. And it may not come often. It may whisper only in still moments. But when it does dot, it feels like peace. Not excitement. Not anxiety, just peace. If you started to hear that whisper, if even faintly comment, "I'm listening," one day you stop asking, "What should I do?" And you begin to ask, "What is quietly calling me?" That's when you know the shift has happened. You've entered what Carl Jung called the symbolic life, a way of living that is not driven by rules or roles, but by resonance. You don't chase plans. You follow signs. It's subtle. You start noticing synchronicities. A book falls off the shelf with the answer you needed. A random conversation mirrors your exact thoughts. A dream speaks louder than your calendar. And you begin to trust that these whispers, these symbols, are not coincidences. They are invitations from your deeper self to live aligned. You no longer need to figure it all out, because clarity isn't something you chase anymore. It arrives, often wrapped in simplicity. Your decisions change too. You don't say yes because it looks good. You say yes because it feels true. You don't say no out of fear. You say no out of knowing. You stop performing and start participating. Life is no longer a stage, it's a conversation. And the soul speaks a different language. It doesn't use urgency. It uses nudges. It doesn't shout. It echoes. That's the symbolic life. You don't always have answers, but you do have alignment. And that's enough. You begin to move from devotion, not obligation. You act not because you're supposed to, but because your entire being says yes. And strangely, that yes moves mountains. If this part resonates, if you've begun to follow life more than lead it, drop a comment. I trust the pull. You live in a world that worships speed. Move faster, do more, show results. And when you don't, it labels you lazy, unproductive, lost. But what if the culture is wrong? What if what they call stuck is actually sacred? Carl Jung warned that the modern mind fears stillness, because in silence, the truth begins to rise. And the truth is rarely convenient. So instead of honoring the pause, we pathologize it. We diagnose, we distract, we medicate momentum. We've built a society that glorifies noise and shelves the soul's natural rhythms. But here's the truth they won't tell you. The pause is not a problem. It's a portal, a gateway between the persona and the self, between who you were and who you're becoming. The ego says, go back to normal. The soul whispers, there is no going back. You've outgrown the old hustle. And that means the world might misunderstand you. You might look idle while doing the deepest work of your life. People may ask, what are you doing with your time? And you'll want to say, I'm unlearning survival. I'm listening to my truth. I'm rebuilding from the inside out. But most won't get it. That's okay. Because you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to understand yourself. So let them think you're behind. You know the truth. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward. And when you emerge, you won't just move again. You'll move differently, with depth, with discernment, with devotion. If the world has misunderstood your stillness and you're ready to claim it, comment, this pause is mine. At the heart of Carl Jung's work is a single, soul-shaping truth. The purpose of life is not perfection, it's individuation. Not becoming someone better, but becoming someone truer. Not achieving more, but shedding everything that isn't you. And that's exactly what this in-between season is doing. It's not erasing you. It's revealing you. Piece by piece, layer by layer, you're returning to the self that was buried under years of proving, performing, pleasing. It's a quiet revolution. You stop asking, who should I be? And you begin asking, who am I when no one is watching? You realize that the self isn't something you create. It's something you uncover. It was always there. Underneath the noise, the roles, the expectations. But to find it, you had to lose the version of you the world applauded. You had to walk away from the dream that wasn't yours. You had to stand in the silence and hear your own voice again. This is individuation. It's not linear. It's not fast. It's not Instagrammable, but it's sacred. It's the slow, steady integration of your truth. The alignment of inner and outer. The remembering that you are not a brand. You are a being. And that being has nothing to prove, but everything to offer. So if you feel like you're in a space where the old no longer fits and the new hasn't too fully formed, that's not a crisis. That's a calling. You are becoming. If you feel this shift in your bones, if you've stepped into the quiet of your becoming, drop a comment. This is who I am. So here you are. You've walked through the silence, faced the shadows, sat with the ache of no longer knowing who you are, or where you're going. You've let go of the fire that once drove you, watched old dreams fade without clinging, watched yourself unravel without rushing to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to hear it. The hum beneath the noise. The whisper that doesn't demand, but invites. The slow pulse of the self, not roaring for attention, but quietly asking, are you ready to live from truth? That's the beginning. Not the end of your awakening, but the start of your becoming. Not a return to old ways, but the birth of a new rhythm. A rhythm not made of hustle, but of alignment. Not pushed by fear, but pulled by resonance. You may still feel unsure. You may not have all the answers. That's okay, because what's rising in you is not clarity that comes in bullet points. It's clarity that comes in breath, in presence, in deep knowing. And that kind of clarity doesn't flicker when the world storms. Carl Jung never promised ease, but he promised depth. And now you know why. Because the path back to yourself requires a sacred pause before it becomes a sacred power. So if you've been wondering where your spark went, remember, the old fire had to burn away so the steady flame could emerge. The one that doesn't fade in chaos. The one that lights you from within. This is not the end. This is the beginning of your real life. If even one line from this journey mirrored your soul, comment, I am becoming. And if someone you love is walking through that sacred in-between, share this with them. Their silence may hold more truth than words ever could.